Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the UnBuildIt podcast. We have an exciting episode this week where we discuss the trade shows and education. The episode is sponsored by Huber Engineered Woods, who just so happens to be a big part of this year's IBSX. That's the exclusive Huber virtual experience, February 9th through the 11th, as part of this year's International Builders Show. Don't forget to register for this great event. It's as easy as going to huberwood.com, clicking on that events tab, selecting register, and filling out that form. You'll get to see the UnBuildIt podcast crew there, as well as some other industry greats like Matt Reisinger, Christine Williamson, Tim Euler, Ben Bogey, and Fred Malik. You'll also be able to catch some great events like the Best of Social Awards, a personal favorite of mine, some new product reveals, and a whole bunch of other really cool things that you're just going to have to go register to see. So click that register button and we'll see you all there.
Let's talk construction management software and what makes a software good. First, I'd say the ability to tackle the tasks that I needed to do, but more importantly, the ability for my team to comprehend the software, my clients to comprehend the software, and everybody involved to actually want to use that software or that interface. BuildBook could be that software for you. BuildBook is simple to learn and use. It allows for constant communication between you, your team members, and your clients. It doesn't waste time with unneeded features, and you won't have to send your team across country to learn how to operate it efficiently. At the end of the day, BuildBook should reduce your stress and your team's stress as well. BuildBook is an all-in-one construction software for today's builders. Whether you're a one-person operation or a large building crew, BuildBook has plans to fit your budget. They don't have any of those nagging sales calls or tricky upsells or hidden fees. You can sign up for a 10-day free trial with BuildBook so that they can teach you and show you what the value is of their product. You should head over to buildbook.co to get started. Don't forget to mention that you heard it from us, the UnBuildIt podcast. That's buildbook.co. Thank you, BuildBook, for your sponsorship.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the UnBuildIt podcast. We got a treat today. We're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about a pretty interesting topic. I know I often get a question of, hey, where can I find out more about this? Hey, where can I get information about that? And the like. And, I've heard people say it to Jake and Peter too in their company. But today we're going to talk about our building industry shows, trade shows, seminars, education, all of that good stuff. So welcome my good buddies Jake.
Hello, hello.
And Peter.
Howdy, neighbors.
There we go. Peter's out west today. He's in Wyoming at a dude ranch that he's coming live from.
I wish you guys could see the chaps and vest with tassels and pearl snap buttons on his shirt.
Totally in character here, but that's all right. Cowboy Pete.
The hobby horse that he's carrying around.
There you go. But yeah, today's an interesting topic, and we're obviously saying it here on the eve of the Builders Show that isn't happening this year.
Well, it is happening.
It's happening, but I'm saying in person. So we're that social aspect, but it is happening, and there's a lot of great things, right? We will, and we'll talk about those. But
can we also talk about whether or not virtual is better than Orlando?
Ooh, that is a tough one. It is funny how
tell us how you really feel, Jake.
How many people love the Builders Show but hate Orlando. Yeah, it's all right. We could certainly dive into that because I'm sure we can register with a lot of listeners on that note. But why don't you guys chime in? Give me some thoughts.
Well, so I'll chime in. So we're talking about things like the International Builders Show, which is once a year for, the world. And then we've got other things like regional trade shows, like, for instance, Better Buildings, Better Business, the B4 up in Wisconsin. Yep. That's on the table. And then things like EBA, the Energy and Environmental Building Association. But are we talking about even more local events as well?
Like a BS and beer?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think, Peter, for you, I will open the spectrum as wide as is required for you to be happy this morning, because that's my goal, is not really getting a great podcast out there. It's making Peter happy.
Wow.
I don't believe that.
There's a little tear trickling down my cheek, my friend. But cowboys don't cry, so it was the cold weather that was making my eyes water.
So, well, here, let me pose this question to both of you. The big show or the little show, right? Do you like the little one where it's 150, 200 people? Or do you like the 100,000, builder show in Vegas?
It depends on what aspect of the show you're asking
you answer.
about.
I'm cutting you off. If you answer any of my question with "it depends."
No, if we're going to talk about the educational content, the actual sit in a classroom and listen to someone talk, I don't like the big show.
All right, let me pose the question a different way, because I'm going to get rid of your "it depends" junk. In 2 weeks, the IBS show is in Vegas, but also there is the Midwest Symposium somehow got scheduled the same week.
Oh my.
Which one do you go to?
That's a very tough one, actually. I'm not sure if I have an immediate answer for that. I might even have to think about this hypothetical question.
And that's okay. Travis won't hate you.
Well, it's his fault for scheduling at the same time.
We'll call it the Northwest Symposium, because then it makes it easier.
Okay, yeah, then I'm going to go to Vegas. Because it's in Vegas. But the point I was trying to make is the educational content at the smaller shows, for me, has been better than at the big show. And the group of people that I'm going to run into there is just as much a dictator of whether or not I'm going to think it's successful as the educational content that's available.
So let's dissect the big show.
Okay.
Let's start with the builder show right at the top. You stated, Pete or Jake, that the social aspect and the floor certainly outweighs any of the educational aspects of that show. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, the access to vendors, the ability to stumble onto things.
And Peter, before I reveal my thoughts, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so I've been going to the International Builders Show since 1993 when I was at the NHB.
1919? What was it? 93?
93, yeah.
Okay.
And I've never liked going.
It's when it was in Hoboken, right?
Well, you're anticipating my answer, which is back then they used to rotate between 4 cities. It was Dallas, Houston, Vegas, and either Orlando or Atlanta.
I think it was Atlanta. Atlanta.
I hated all the locations, frankly. It was just a pain in the ass. But the funny thing about Houston was Houston didn't have the downtown hotels. So at the research center, we ended up staying at a hotel that was like an hour and a half from the actual venue, which was horrible. But in Houston at the Astrodome, they had these color-coded tubes that were on the ceiling of all the event halls, including the Astrodome. And so you could take your guide, and all the places you wanted to go were color-coded. And so you just looked up and you followed that tube. So that was really, really cool, because no matter how complicated the venue got, you could follow the tubes, even if you weren't like...
As long as you're not colorblind, you were able to navigate the show.
Well, or I was going to say, even inebriated, you could find your way around. But
is this really the thing that you thought of? Is this the topic that you thought of? Oh, they color-coded the venue. That's the most important part.
Well, yeah, because to me, getting around at the trade shows, because they're so large, I got so many times it's like you're walking down one row and it stops and the numbering starts someplace else. And
fair enough.
Join us, Pete Talks Color Coding, live on the UnBuildIt podcast.
That's a good insight into how Pete's brain works too, by the way, those that you don't know Peter very well.
But Peter, you certainly spoken at the Builder Show more than I have. I did have the ability a couple times to speak at it, and they used to have a really good deal where you could buy like a 1-day deal for like $200 and you get admission to the floor, which they've cut out. But I have always found as a speaker and as an attendee to the educational aspect of it, they're never really long enough. And a lot of times you end up getting 3 or 4 panelists that now have, 10 or 15 minutes. So you can't tell your story in 10 or 15 minutes. I don't like being that person on the stage, and I certainly don't like being the person out in the crowd, because neither one of you are getting anything.
Well, so I was going to say, the whole idea of the way that they vet speakers, the way that they set up the sessions, I've always liked the smaller venues. They just do a much better job of connecting topic to speaker to attendee. And I was also going to say that, I think a lot of venues struggle with how they pick their keynote speaker, to make it meaningful, but also interesting. And I also think that the smaller conferences or events, I've always liked the ones that take the time to do a wrap up, so that if you didn't get a chance to attend a certain session because it was scheduled at the same time as another one, people could bring that up as part of like an open floor discussion at the end. So I really like the events that have like a debrief at the end of the conference. And I've only ever seen those at the smaller venues, like the regional ones, Nessie, the B4 conference, Better Buildings by Design, which is the, Vermont one, and entertaining longer sessions with fewer speakers per session.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting is for me, you take the Builder Show, the social aspect is the primary reason to go, and everything else kind of becomes a byproduct. But for something like the B4 conference or Nessie, that's to go and listen to the classes and walk the floor. And as a byproduct, I get the social networking out of that. So it's funny how, for me personally, it's inversely proportional based on the size of the show as to what's driving me to go.
It's interesting. I was asked a couple months ago if I was coming back to Better Buildings, Better Business, the B4 conference in Wisconsin, which is one of my very favorites. I've spoken there 12 or 13 years in a row. And I told him, if you're going online, I'm not really that interested in being a speaker, because the thing I enjoyed most about the B4 conference was going to Wisconsin, seeing all the high performance builders from that area of the country. Their experiences and knowledge are a little bit different than New England. And it was the social part of the conference that attracted me to travel out there. Yeah. So
what's cool about that place, Peter, is that the place where you ate your meals was right there on the expo floor. So you could talk to somebody, and then, somebody from one of the manufacturers or whatever would walk by, and you'd jump up and go talk to them.
Yeah.
And it was this fully integrated, which I agree with you. I really appreciated that, where like IBS, it's like you dread trying to find a place to eat at lunchtime.
Yeah, it's really, Jake, you should probably jump in, but I was just going to say the food, right? The home building crossroads that Huber and other sponsors do, holy smokes. They knock it out of the park with the food, and they connect the food to the sponsors and exhibitors. And you're right. Food at IBS is just a frickin' disaster. You might as well bag a brown lunch.
Yeah. It's like trying to eat at the airport, Jake, what are your thoughts, buddy?
I think the theme that I'm hearing is when it comes to the smaller shows, that inclusive nature where everybody's stuck together in the off time is valuable. Which, when I started thinking about this, it's like the Fine Home Building Summit. What is the town that it was in? Middle of nowhere.
The Connecticut location for the...
Yeah. What is it, Steve? Town? Where was the Fine Home Building Summit?
In Connecticut.
Oh, it was in Southbridge, Mass.
Southbridge, Mass.
There's nothing after you leave the convention center, so everybody just stayed there.
Yeah.
Building Science Summer Camp.
But yeah, at
or
6
the
o'clock
Midwest
at
Building
night,
Science.
the bar had 250 people in it.
Yep. And we're all talking about the stuff that we heard that day, and that exchange of ideas that you get. That's like my favorite part of
you were
ideas.
beating up on Ben Bogey, and I was trying to tell you to be a little more lenient on him, but
maybe he had it coming, maybe he didn't.
But I would agree the atmosphere at the Fine Home Building Summit was among the best. That I don't know if it's because of the way that people revere that publication, and how their staff is got a lot of real world experience and out on job sites. That was really well done. Really good.
I could have done without the keynote that year, though. Too, the keynote speaker that year sucked.
He was horrible.
Oh boy.
I think
there are people that don't know that Steve was the keynote speaker and he didn't even come back at all.
But
so was I.
I think that the nice thing about those size conferences, that Nessie, EBA, is that the spectrum is a much narrow spectrum of like-minded individuals. So there's really good conversations, and and there's people at some of them that you wouldn't see, in other places. So it's like, oh, I'm going to go to EBA just so I can talk to this person, that person, and this person, because I know they're going to be there. And
and Jake mentioned sort of on the slide, but we can't not talk about Building Science Corporation's Summer Symposium. I know it's by invitation only, but half the time it's not the content of the presentations there. It's the incredible side conversations of hours and hours of social events, that are draped around that, and just top-notch people in the industry. That whole experience is really hard to.
And so for those of you that haven't had the pleasure of going to that event, there is one room where everyone that's attending the entire event listens to the same speakers the whole day. You might get somebody that presents all morning and then the afternoon be split into a couple, and then everybody goes to the same place, all 500 people, after the day's presentations, and everybody talks about it. And so there's no, oh, I missed that. I should have went to that presentation instead of sitting in on this other thing. Like, everybody gets the same content. And then that community after the fact is where, like, for me, I can be like, I didn't understand what he meant by this, or I didn't understand the chart that she put up, or any of those sorts of things, which if you go to even like EBA, and EBA's in Dallas or Denver or something, and you took different classes than the other people that you're there with, you took different classes than the people that that are there, and you split up into groups of 4 to go eat dinner that night, and so you get 3 other people's ideas max, and that's what Travis tried to do last year with the Building Science Symposium as well. He had it at a brewery in Kansas City where we had one presentation all day. Again, one of the presenters was great, and the other one was Steve. And then after the fact, there was happy hour where everybody was able to stand around, have a beer, and talk about
That's 2 strikes today, Bruton. That's 2. Just saying.
Well, and who was there? There was a guy who tried to do a winter Building Science Symposium in the Midwest. Gosh almighty.
I don't know. What was this, like 62, 63?
No.
Summer of Love?
Because this guy's
Is this pre-Gulf War or post-Gulf War?
Anyway, so the other thing that we were going to talk about, I think, was the difference between in person and online. And I know, I've really struggled with that because I've tried to teach, college level courses online in addition to participating in the online events. And it is just, talk about the difference between really connecting with people and talking into the ether.
Can we say online works, but it sucks? How about that?
Well, and look at our current venue, the podcast, right? I mean, this is online. And the only reason I do this is because of the two of you. If I didn't...
Oh, thank you, Peter.
No, seriously. I mean, if I was doing something like this, talking to myself or with other people that I didn't know, that just doesn't fly. So...
No,
because
social aspect's a big part of it.
Yeah, we turned the virtual thing into a social thing. So this isn't really a virtual thing for us. It just so happens to be that right now, because we're not traveling, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. The virtual thing is incredibly difficult. I think all three of us presented at the Fine Home Building Summit both years, the in-person and the virtual year, this year or 2020. And the feedback that you're like, when you're in person and you're presenting or you're watching and you can raise your hand or somebody goes, well, what about this? That conversation is potentially more meaningful than the presentation that was happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And engagement
is really difficult.
Yeah. The engagement that happens with, in person compared to online, it just makes a huge difference. And it doesn't matter whether it's a class of students or a bunch of builders and architects. The connection you get in person is just really, really hard to have
it's a hard one. I mean, I think, when I look at, IBS, it's like, walking the floor and chatting with people certainly is a good time, but going out to dinner that evening with a dozen people and the conversations that you have there are far more, not only more interesting, but more informative, I think, because then you're getting somebody's true opinion.
Yeah. And challenging.
And challenging. Yeah. People are going to speak a little bit more freely. And, one of my favorite things, I'm going to bring this up, is, I'm a huge proponent of it. I think all of them, I love going to them. I think you should go to them. One of the interesting things that I get back from builders and friends when I say, oh, you should come out to the builder show with me, or, hey, you should go to this. I don't have the time. And my answer to them is, you're exactly the person that needs to go out and go to these shows and do this. Because if you don't have the time to invest into that side of it, then I don't think you're doing what you should be doing at work. Meaning you don't have your business or whatever
if you
running
can't step
the way
away
it
for
should.
3 days.
If you can't step away for 3 days to go and better yourself, and because even as some of the shows, builder show, I'm sure there's probably at least 5 or 6 people that are talking about time management and building, construction management and stuff like that. So go there, take 2 or 3 courses from someone there, and then, go see what's new, make contacts. For me, I have always said, being a sole proprietor, all these companies become extensions and manufacturers become extensions of who I am. So developing a Rolodex, how about that for
blast from the past?
Timing myself, but developing a good network of, hey, when I have a problem with warm board floor, who am I calling? Or when I have a problem with zip sheathing, who am I calling? Or Advantech or whatever it is. It's these companies, they love it. New things are always coming out, so you can go into their booth and say, hey, what's new? What can I be looking for in the future? And not only that, but it's good for the manufacturers because they get thousands of builders and architects coming through, and they're asking the question, hey, what do you think what do you think we need to be looking at? What do you think we need to be doing? So there is this kind of informal industry exchange that is for the better of the industry, certainly.
We didn't bring up Journal Light Construction, the JLC Live.
You should bring it up.
Well, I was going to say that.
I was thinking we should talk about JLC Live, though, too. Let's not forget about that.
Yeah. You guys ever thought about talking about JLC Live?
Here. Yeah, but I don't want to drive it in the ground and make a JLC dead either. What I was going to say is, how do you guys feel about educational sessions as opposed to floor demos? Because I think one of the things that JLC Live does really well, but also gets done at IBS, are sort of building education on the trade floor as opposed to going into a classroom. What do you guys think about that?
It's very doable. The difficult thing about the trade floor is you have to stumble upon it for the most part. Ben Bogey and I, that was 2020, did multiple classes at the Huber outdoor booth about how to flash windows. And the demo was 90 minutes long. Where else do you get access to a builder and get 90 minutes on how to flash your window rough openings? But then again, you got to stumble on it, or you really got to go through that catalog enough to find that one thing. And at places like IBS, that's very challenging. There's so much stuff that you can see and do.
And I think it's the quality of the presenter doing the live demo. I won't talk about you guys because that's just too close. But, we could talk about Mike Girton. He's a guy that I could sit and listen to for 3 hours talking about how to build a deck or flash a roof. And part of it is one, he's a wealth of knowledge and he has a story to everything, right? You can say, hey, look at this, these baby tins. Oh, well, I remember in 73 with my brother, we used to recycle these, take them off old houses, straighten them back out, and run them through a little press. And, he just has a story for everything.
It's true.
But the other thing about Mike is super professional is he uses materials and he talks about them, but he doesn't sell them, right?
Yep.
His presentations he's not a manufacturer trying to sell something. He's just saying, hey, if you're looking to flash this cheek wall on a dormer, this is the best way to do it. And this is how I do it. These are the materials I use. Come to your own conclusions. But he's a joy to watch. And I've also been on, some floor demos where it was an absolutely total failure. And I'm not going to mention the couple, but, I was standing there with a builder and it was some flashing and a whole bunch of installation. And I looked at the builder and I was like, what do you think? And he goes, this guy's doing a demo on a floor here in perfect conditions. If I'm doing that on scaffolding on the coast in March with a 30-mile-an-hour wind, and it takes him 45 minutes to do it here, how long is it going to take me to do it out there? Right? And so the demo it's good in some sense, but in some sense it's revealing in maybe that isn't what we should be doing. Right?
Yeah, that was educational, right? You went, yep, that product's not for us.
There's always something to learn, for sure.
When you say there's always something to learn, Steve, and you mentioned Mike Girton, I just want to tell you a real quick story, which is, he and I and Steve did all the work on the Green Building Advisor drawings together. And as part of that, Mike learned that I was going to be doing a 2-day building science class up at Yestermorrow in northern Vermont. And Mike says, hey, can I come and, be in that class?
Audit the class?
And I said, Mike, you're not going to learn a damn thing. It's going to be all review. He goes, oh, no, that's not true. I always learn something. So he came up to northern Vermont for 2 days, sat in the classroom, contributed to the class, And the thing about guys like Mike is people like that are always learning. You know, they always are looking for the piece of information that is going to nudge them to do something a little bit differently. So one of the reasons he's such a strong builder and educator is he is totally open to learning, even though it's something that he's done a million times.
You know what, Peter? I have a story now.
Cool.
You know,
Is this a Mike Gerton story?
It does relate to him because it certainly, he falls in the category, but someone that I highly respected years ago that worked with is, you know, his 2 rules of success were be there. And when you said, where's there? He said, you know where there is, be there. And, you know, wherever you are supposed to be there. And he said, while you're there, shut up and listen. You might learn something. And I think one of Gerton's prized successes is he's willing to listen. Like you could say, hey, Jay could bring Sydney, and Sydney, you know, Sydney's a great girl, but she's new to the industry and such. But if Sydney said, oh, hey, Mike, let me tell you what happened last week about this radon pipe, Mike would listen. Mm-hmm. He wouldn't blow her off. He would listen intently. He would probably come back with a story of his own and totally engage the conversation. And they would both come out of that with something, because that's just who he is. He's a person that arguably you could sit there and say, I don't know many builders that probably know more than he does. Mm-hmm. And if he was sitting here, he'd be like, oh, come on. There's tons of guys out there that know a hell of a lot more than I do, but we know better. But it's his willingness to listen and engage in the conversation and not take that high road of, why am I talking to you? There's nothing that you at age 21 is going to offer me. I've been doing this a hell of a long time. Like Jake's grumpy plumber, right? He doesn't want to be told, certainly by Sydney, that the radon pipe and sewer pipe were mixed up. But I think that's one of his successes. And I guess where I'm going with this is when you go to something like IBS, instead of going there and, you know, with your mouth wide open, go there with your ears wide open, because there's a lot of people talking. There's a lot of people talking about great stuff, telling stories, in that, man, if you just sit down, you will be overwhelmed with the amount of information that you can extract and use.
Yeah, so we're really interested in the conversations hedged over to how do you pick good speakers and professionals in your area as compared to the event. And there are some venues that do a much better job of getting high quality speakers.
I just pick them when their names begin with Y and end in T. I go to that class.
That was a nice way to compliment him for once. But Peter's 100% correct in that there are conferences that just have better speakers than other conferences, show management or whatever it is.
Well, I don't know. I want to play devil's advocate for a second, because I would say that maybe it's not that they have better speakers. They have more attractive speakers to your line of thinking.
I can agree with that completely. Or
right?
just something that affects me.
You can go to IBS and you can listen to how to market and use photos to sell your houses online and use house and all of these things that you'd sit there and go, man, this is a boring class. I could care less because it's not of interest to me and it doesn't align with my thinking.
Yep.
But certainly I would agree is that when you do find those speakers that are in line with thinking, and even if you heard them before, right? I mean, look at, I can't even believe I'm going to give him this praise, but look at Peter.
Uh-oh.
Right? I mean, I don't know. I can't imagine there's anybody that's heard you speak more than I have.
Probably. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the reality is I tell people, as many times as I've heard you speak, I always learn something.
At least when you're awake.
That's just bad. I only sleep when you speak.
Does he fall asleep
you,
every time you talk, Peter, or is it just sometimes?
No, I fully engage when Peter talks. I come back. I'm throwing stuff from the back of the room up there. I'm heckling.
We glossed over that too. He actually has fallen asleep every time he's listened to me talk, by the way.
Well, that's because I said, don't bore me. If you don't want me to sleep, don't bore me. But Peter changes it up. He updates, he modifies, and it's like if I went and saw him last year speak and now I'm going to see him this year, I'm going to catch up on what he did in the last year and how those things changed. And are you falling asleep, Jake, when I'm talking? Yeah. But he modifies it and he brings it up. And I try and do that in the stuff that I show. It's like I could sit there and show the same project from 12 years ago, but I'm trying to show how we got to where we're at today in some of the more recent projects. So,
well, and that gets back to why when we were setting up UnBuildIt podcast, I agreed to do this was that, the advantage to me to deal with a top builder and a top architect, you guys look at buildings very differently than I do. And so I get to learn a lot because that lens you guys use just makes me a better professional in what I do because your approach to the whole topic is always unique compared to the way I look at it. So I learn a lot.
I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you. I learned a ton too. Let's do
I don't learn anything here. I don't learn jack here.
You learn there's better uses of your time. Let's do a like super cheesy. What are your 4 conferences if you could only go to 4 this year? Like in a non-COVID year, what are the 4 that you would choose? Any volunteers to go first?
Yeah, Builder Show Vegas. Certainly. JLC is a good one because
JLC Northeast.
JLC Northeast. I've never been to the other one, so I don't have a reference to it.
Same here.
But JLC Northeast for me is kind of a boots to the ground type conference, right? I can go and talk to manufacturers about, nailing patterns and this and that and shear values. And I don't know, IBS, even though some of the vendors are at the same booth, it just seems like the activities and the chatter at IBS is a little more superficial than it is at JLC Live. Mm-hmm. It's
a little more glad handy. Like, nice to see you. Good to see you again. Thanks for selling our products.
Like, hey, we're going to be here. And hey, are you coming, to the social awards? And are you coming to this and all that? And it's all good, but it's just, there's a different feeling when you go to that. The B4 conference, like Peter said, I really liked it. And that one wasn't big. What did they have? Like 700 people, maybe, Peter?
I think their top numbers are 800 to 900. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not overwhelming, but on that one, the thing that I liked about it really was when I wasn't speaking, I found some very intriguing other speakers that I wanted to go listen to.
Yeah.
Right.
John, the guy,
Viner.
John Viner is the guy who sets those up. He does a really good job at getting good speakers. But I was going to say Better Buildings by Design in Wisconsin has always been one of my favorites because I like that community. But, JLC Live, and I thought the Fine Home Building Summit in person was really a good event.
Great.
And so I'm picking local events or regional events because I'm just not a real big IBS fan, regardless of what city it's in. Jake,
even though there's only been one so far, and this is going to be the second year for it, the Midwest Building Science Symposium, just because of that, everybody listens to the same thing. I love that. I absolutely love that. And Travis is pushing really hard to make it a 2-day event this year. So you're looking at least 4 speakers, if not, 5 or 6, that everybody hears the same people talk.
What time of year?
Well, that'll be good because last year they had the 2 speakers on each side of the room. You could hardly hear in the back. So doubling the amount of speakers is good.
God, that's such a stupid joke. And I laughed so much at that. That's good.
It's such a stupid joke, but he's having a heart attack over it.
It's
when is that event?
October, I believe. I think is when it was this year. I would assume that's going to happen.
It was
again.
October 27th. Yes.
There you go.
I think the other thing to sorry, Jake, go ahead.
I'm full in with the Fine Home Building Summit, JLC, as well. Those are fantastic conferences. I've been to EBA a couple times and had good stuff, and I've been to EBA a couple times and had but that doesn't mean that there was anything wrong with EBA that year. That meant that I picked things that weren't geared towards my interest.
So I think one thing we can say is that, and Steve brought this up, you need to take the time to go, because it always seems like you don't have the time. But, you know, as Sam Levinson said, we can never live long enough to make all the mistakes ourselves. We must learn from the mistakes of others. And so going back to people like Mike Gert and speakers that are willing to talk honestly about, you know, what they do and don't know and the things they've done right and learn lessons learned, that's just invaluable.
Yep.
You know, and Mike is like the kind of guy, like I could see going to JLC Live, seeing him there and saying, "Hey, Mike, can you come over here to the Versatex booth? And I got a couple questions for you." Mike would march right over there and give you everything he knows about Versatex, right? And using PVC trim and the likes, dislikes, and a wealth of knowledge. So where do you buy that? Where do you get that if you're not getting it there?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't get that anywhere. And I use him as an example, and he's a damn good one. But there's probably, 50, hundreds of people that are like him that you could do the same thing. I mean, I used IBS one year. I actually had a client fly out there for a day, and we walked around the floor because there's no other place where we can go around and put our hands on 50 different products in 8 hours.
Yep.
Right? You can go to the doors, you can go to windows, and you could go to showrooms and stuff, but this is all there.
Yeah.
We can go look at these windows and then walk across the aisle and look at these windows and have a chat about them. Right? It's
that's actually really smart. It's kind of like get it all in one spot and knock it out quickly, even though you had to go to Vegas or Orlando.
Vegas, but that's not the end. Hey, the one thing I want to tell you guys about is I'm going to just shift off a little because you asked about my favorites. I had the opportunity to go to the big show in Nuremberg, Fensterbau or whatever it is, the window and door show in Germany. For those of you that have been to IBS, think of a show that's probably, it's at least, I would say, 6 times the size of IBS.
Holy cow.
And it's only 2 days. So you have to pick where you want to go and what you want to do because you cannot see the whole thing. But beyond the crazy scale of it, every one of the vendors, just the way the Europeans viewed selling and the show versus how we do it here. If you look at some of the larger booths like Schuco, the largest manufacturer of windows, their booth was probably the size of like a whole block of floor displays at IBS, right? Like one whole row too wide. And that was their one booth. In their booth, not only did they have all their products, they had like a little mini restaurant, cafe, a bar, a seating area. And, the gentleman that I was with was from Slovakia. And, in our conversations with him, he said, yeah, that's how we do it here. We make the deal right here at the show. If you want to buy something or you want to know something, we answer your questions right here. It's not go look up on our website or talk to us later. No, talk to us now. You got a question, ask us. We'll go over here. We'll get a drink. We'll sit down comfortably and we'll answer your questions, which I thought was a pretty cool tact for a trade show, that you could just grab somebody, go sit down, have a beer with them, and talk about their window hardware.
Yeah, that's interesting. As opposed to this 3 weeks later, you get an email that's generic form. Hey, you stopped by our booth and you asked about X. Here's the information about X. And you go, what booth? I don't remember talking to these people. And
I also think two things. One, personally, I like to put a face with the name, right? If I'm calling, Warmboard or something, then now I know I'm talking to Ross. Well, I met Ross at the Builder Show. I know who Ross is. I know what Ross does, what his capabilities are and such from the conversation that I had with him. I think on the flip side, because I took the time to go out to the show and meet with Ross, that I potentially get better service from Ross because he now has a face with my name, right? It's like, oh, yeah, I remember Steve. He came by, he came talk to us for like 40 minutes in the booth. Yeah, let me do everything I can to help him out. As opposed to the guy that just is cold calling from the website and saying, our world is certainly moving faster, and, we can do all these things electronically and message and, talk via Instagram and Messenger and all that. But I don't think there's ever a replacement for, shaking someone's hand and having a discussion.
Yeah, that good organically evolving conversation is...
I hate that word. And I know you're just trying to work it in.
But that's the whole gist of this entire podcast. Find a conference, talk to people, use it as an opportunity to engage with other people in the industry and expand your knowledge in directions that potentially you didn't even know you needed or were interested in.
Yeah, and search out things. It's, when I'm at IBS, I actually find it interesting that, there's some large booths there, certainly, that take up half a city block. And it's cool to walk through, but I like going to all the little perimeter aisles and just seeing kind of all the gadgetry and thought-provoking ideas that are coming that aren't quite mainstream yet because they can't afford that big booth. So they're down at the end in that small booth.
That's where I learned about Aero Barrier.
Yeah. It's, it's stuff like that it's out there, and you're not going to figure that out by staying at home. And here's the interesting thing too, that to get back to the part of, you're exactly the person that should be going. When I look at the list of builders and associates, architects and such that are doing things, and the ones that go to these shows and have fun and do their thing versus the ones that don't. The ones that don't are the ones that are really the ones struggling with their business and trying to figure it out. The ones that pretty much have it figured out are the ones that are traveling and going to the shows and doing the social thing. And I find that really interesting. Yeah. And the last thing, and then I'll certainly let you guys add in, but one of the other things that I find that we've been doing a lot recently that is just a huge help is taking some time to be extremely social at those events. Like last year at the Builder Show, I know you weren't able to join us, Peter, but the day before, like 10 of us went out there and we rented, dune buggies, and we raced around the Vegas desert. And you might sit there and say, okay, yeah, it was cool. We got to ride the dune buggies and stuff, but it also means really that it was really cool. But now I have 9 or 10 people that I'm closer to that, I can call these guys with questions and say, hey, on IG, I saw you putting in these windows. Did you do this, that, or I got a couple questions for you. But you have that comfort level now because you've expanded that network,
you're building relationships
even further.
Sorry, but I have this image in my head of two dune buggies next to each other at 50 miles per hour. You're screaming questions at each other. So how do you flush a window?
No.
It was more
Peter,
like...
needless to say, I consistently was getting lost in the desert.
He kept getting lost because he was trying to hold his phone up while he was driving 50 miles per hour and bouncing around and like trying to... It was like the ultimate text while driving kind of... There's nothing to hit, but he can certainly make him and everybody else behind him get lost.
Oh, boy. And on that note...
Well, I have one pro tip that we haven't talked about yet that I think you guys would agree with. Any conference that you decide you want to attend, submit a presentation. That way you get to go to the conference for free.
Right.
Present, and then they pay you to present, and it makes the conference cheaper, or at least they cover part of your day.
There you go.
Well, you know what else is interesting, though, in doing that? Because there's even a little bit more to that, I think. Like, if you're doing JLC Live and you're presenting, you get to go into the presenter's room and get your snacks or whatever. But more importantly, now you're developing a network of other speakers and professionals, right? Because they see you in there and it's like, oh, hey, how you doing? What are you talking about today? Or what are you doing? And you engage in that conversation with somebody that I might have never talked to before or had a reason to have that conversation with. Now I'm having that conversation with them. And it's just somebody else in my network that is now considered an expert in that field.
Yep. Okay. Steve, are you going to wrap us up? You're the host today.
Well, I think this has been a pretty organic discussion. And I say that because you guys know I hate that word. But no, so, here we are, like I said. We're going virtual with IBS this year. I'm saddened by it because I love that show. I like being out there and meeting everybody and chatting and having conversations. And there's a couple of our sponsors, certainly for the UnBuildIt podcast, have a lot going on there. Go on to the IBS X Factor and register for Huber. There's a lot of great things. The three of us are going to be doing some really cool things with them. And we know Christina and Matt and Tim from Awesome Framers. They're all going to be involved in some really cool stuff too. So you get to hear even more of us. But yeah, go register for that. And, hopefully JLC Live is scheduled for August this year.
August 11th. I got an email while we were sitting here recording.
Yeah. I mean, Peter and I were scheduled to talk at the Pressure Sensitive Tape Council.
Yep, you got it.
If you can believe that they have an annual... yeah. But they had just canceled. They were in May, and they said that they're going to put it off. They failed to do it last year, and they're going to put it off again this year. So we're not going to get to that. But even something like that, I mean, I'm intrigued to go because when you sit there and say, okay, Pressure Sensitive Tape Council, it's like, okay, who the hell are they and why do I care?
Peter can tell you. He's friends with all of them.
And I'm sure that could be a whole show. But I'm intrigued because I think there's something to learn, and there's this whole arena of people that I have no concept of. So it'll be interesting there. But anyways, so let's wrap this up. Great discussion with my two great friends here. There probably isn't much better way to spend my time than chatting with these two about stuff. But that being said, if you get the chance, get out there, go see those people, come meet us out at the show. Let's walk around, let's chat, let's educate, let's share that knowledge. If you see Mike Gurton anywhere, you tell him Steve said that, hey, Mike, Steve promised that you're going to walk around with me for an hour and enlighten me, hour and a half, and enlighten me, and I'm sure he will. But for those of you that sit there and say, I don't have the time, I don't think it's worth it, I don't think you can be any more wrong.
I agree. On that note, thank you for listening to the UnBuildIt podcast. Don't forget, you can email us questions or comments at questions@unbuilditpodcast.com. You can also listen to the podcast through that website, unbuilditpodcast.com. Follow us on Instagram.
Speaking of podcasts, I listened to your, is it Energy E3?
Yeah, with Emily.
With Emily. So big shout out to Emily. Go listen to her podcast. Jake was on there last week. I listened to it. He actually did an okay job. I mean, I think Peter and I, the training that we're giving him here is really starting to, show up out in the public realm. So go listen to Jake, and you guys know I'm busting on him.
My favorite aspect of your personality, Steve, is how humble you are.
Yeah. I tell it like it is. You don't like it? Shut me off. I don't care.
Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and please go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. We really enjoy doing this, or I really enjoy doing this. The other two tolerate it. And we're really happy that the podcast is continuing to grow and that we're seeing good response from our listeners, and that it feels like we're making an impact, and that you folks enjoy what we're doing here, and that's why we're doing it.
Hear, hear.
So,
and register for the IBS X Factor.
Okay.
At Huber's site.
Thanks for listening. This is the
guys.
UnBuildIt podcast.